You guys are muted. We cannot hear.
Sorry for that.
Okay, we'll pass roll. Here today from the water board is Dale Van Stone.
Turns out the loud. Yeah, we can't hear.
We can't hear you. Okay.
I think, is there a speaker? No.
Are there? Okay.
Let's speak louder.
The purpose of this meeting is to review the Priest Lake Outlet Dam operating protocols following completion of the recent dam modifications, and to discuss how these protocols will guide future operations. This meeting is also intended to help the public better understand the statutory requirements, operational tools, and technical information the Idaho Water Resource Board uses to balance lake levels, river flow, and other management objectives. Finally, the board wants to hear from lake and river users to better understand the range of interest and concerns associated with Priest Lake operations. So these perspectives can be considered and incorporated into future operational decisions whenever consistent with the board's legal responsibilities and best available information. Now, if you want to speak, there's a sign-in sheet back there, and you note that you want to just give testimony to speak. But item one is the Priest Lake Outlet Dam Introduction and History, and that is Amy Castle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a couple more seats up here if people don't want to stand. Please feel free to sit in the front row. And if we need to, I think the library can get us some more, the gals and could perhaps get us some 2 more chairs to come there. So it's a small room, but we're doing the best we can here. Yeah, staff doesn't use it, just kidding. There's a couple more speakers if you would like to take a seat, please do. Okay, so. Go. All right, so my name is Amy Castle. How's my volume? Good, okay. I am a project manager in the Planning and Projects Bureau of the Idaho Department of Water Resources. And so I work for and report to the Idaho Water Resource Board. This morning, I'm going to give a pretty brief presentation on some history, provide a timeline and some of the authorities that dictate the operations of the Priest Lake Outlet Dam. Okay. Fine. Here we go. So the purpose of my presentation today, for both the audience and the board members, is again to provide a brief history of the Priest Lake Outlet Dam. I will include a timeline of some important dates and decisions, and then I'll briefly discuss the statutory authority and some other regulatory documents and policies that dictate the operation of the dam. So the goal of this presentation is to provide some historical context and some of the legal framework for current dam operations and best practices going forward. So staff has been able to procure some pretty cool historic photos of the outlet, Priest Lake Outlet pre-dam construction. And so, as I'm sure many of you know, pre-dam construction, the outlet bay was used for logging operations. So this is in the 1940s. So they would actually harvest logs around Priest Lake and then floated them down the lake into the outlet and down the Priest River to various mills in the region. The photo on the left shows men actually working at the log jam on the Priest River in 1940. And then the photo on the right is a picture of Diamond Mash Lumber Mill, which was located at Priest Lake Outlet. That was also taken in the 1940s. So these logging operations in the outlet channel resulted in lake level fluctuations that impacted some lakefront property owners on Priest Lake. And in 1949, some of the lakefront property owners and the state actually petitioned the governor of Idaho to stabilize lake levels, so requested that. So that year, a state field engineer was sent to Priest Lake Outlet Bay, and he inspected the outlet area, and based on his observations, recommended construction of a low overflow dam near the lumber mill in the outlet bay in order to raise the lake level approximately 2 feet to its natural elevation. So in September 1950, an easement was developed to maintain the dam across Priest River. So I'm going to briefly go into some of the statute that was developed in 1950. It was amended a number of times, but originally Idaho Code Section 70-501 authorized the outlet control structure downstream of the Diamond Match Mill. 502, 70-502 approved the construction. 70-503 established funds so they could receive money to build a dam. And then Idaho Codes 70-504, 505 actually appropriated money to construct the dam. The meat of the operations language comes from this Idaho Code 70-507, which was originally written, included in that 1950 legislation, but was updated in 2018. In 2018, ownership was transferred to the Idaho Water Resource Board. Originally, the lake level was authorized to go to 3 feet, but in 2018, the authorized lake level was from 0.1 foot to 3.5. So it added an additional 6 inches of height to the lake. Also included language about maintaining between 3 and 3.5 feet through the recreation season, which is interpreted to begin on Memorial Day weekend. And then other times of the year, maintain between 1 foot or 0.1 foot and 3 feet. Okay, so just a little bit of a timeline to discuss that got us from the 1950s construction to where we are today. So as I mentioned, that legislation was passed in 1950. Washington Water Power constructed the outlet dam on behalf of the state of Idaho. And that dam was constructed primarily of wood and rock-filled timber. Between 1953 and 1955, Northern Lights applied to the Federal Power Commission to build 2 hydropower facilities on Priest Lake. The state of Idaho code discouraged the Federal Power Commission from issuing those licenses, and clearly they were not issued. By 1979, that timber-filled timber and rock-filled dam was starting to deteriorate. So a new concrete dam was constructed in 1979 that had 11 radial gates, and it was located approximately 50 feet downstream of the original dam. In 2002, a Vista replaced Washington Water Power and continued to operate the dam until 2011. In 2012, the Idaho Department of Water Resources begins the management of operations, and they contract with individuals to manage those daily operations on their behalf. In 2015, the Northern Idaho experienced one of the most severe droughts on record. There were significant concerns about maintaining that 3-foot lake level. Priest River below the outlet dropped to about 41.4 CFS on August 13th, 2015. This greatly impacted fisheries populations and other aquatic species. So in response to that, in 2018, the board, through that amended 70-507, became the owner of the dam. And at that point, the board initiated what we call the Priest Lake Water Management Study. And the water management study looked at a lot of things involving Priest Lake and Priest River, but as it pertained to the outlet dam, the objectives were to obviously maintain lake levels in dry years, while also maintaining stream flows in the river. Look at potential structural and operation modifications to the dam. Minimize impact on water quality and shoreline properties. And also, of course, preserve beneficial uses and critical habitat for aquatic species. So as a result of that water management study in 2022, between years 2022 and 2024, there was actually construction and a dam raise. So as I mentioned before, in 2018, the legislature authorized 6 more inches at the lake level. So we went from 3 feet to 3.5 feet. And so then construction began, and the main goal of that increase in gate height was to make it possible to hold another 6 inches of water in the lake. And the intent was to enable the storage more water in the early recreation season in order to have more water to release into the river in the late summer. So there were some other improvements made at that time. Obviously, there was an increased load on those gates with that additional 6 inches of height of water. So they did some improvement on the ribs, on the downstream side of the gates. They were strengthened. There was also an extension of the concrete apron and additional rock armor to provide additional scour protection. So there were various improvements made to that outlet dam between the years of 2022 and 2024. So I just wanted to touch on briefly, obviously I talked about Idaho Code Section 70-507, went through that and what those statutes authorize as far as Priest Lake operations go. But then there's some other important documents and guidance, policy, regulatory that influence how that dam was operated. So we've got the governor's Priest Lake level water right that has a priority date of 1927 for 800,000 acre feet. And then in 1950, we got those code 70-501 through 507, which was amended in 2018 for the additional 6 inches. There was a lower Priest River in-stream flow study. So in 1992, the Idaho Department of Fish and Game entered into a contract with the Idaho Department of Water Resources to conduct an assessment of fish habitat needs in the Priest River downstream of the outlet dam. The purpose of this assessment was to recommend a minimum stream flow for fish habitat. And that report recommended a flow for 200 CFS as minimum for rearing for adult and juvenile cutthroat and Raybould. And that was measured at the now discontinued Dickinson. It's a hard word to say. Maybe that's why they moved the gauge. Which is quantified at that gauge, which I'm not gonna say again. You guys, the locals probably know exactly where that is. There's a campground of 200 CFS between August 1st and October 31st. So I think based on that document, a lot of that information went into the Priest River Basin Plan, which was written initially in 1990, but then amended in 1995, and that's basically the operational plan that we are using. It's posted to our website if you'd like to review that. And that has a lot of information about obviously the Priest River Basin in general, but it does have some information about the lake as well. That was amended in 2003. And then in 1997, the board obtained a minimum stream flow water rate on Priest River. So that's a priority date of 1997, and that has a flow rate of 300 CFS, obviously based on the guidance from that Fish and Game report of 300 CFS in Priest River between August 1st and October 31st. And then there were some with those various power companies that operated the dam for years and worked with local operators. There were some historic operation agreements that basically had a policy to maintain a minimum of 60 CFS discharge into the river. So that's 60 CFS just below the outlet dam. So, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, that is essentially the bulk of my slides, and with that, I will stand for questions.
Any questions for Amy? Yes, sir.
My name is Todd Gardner. I'm just curious, can the dam, I understand the reason for the dam. And I understand and like the 6 inches they've added, I think it's helped the river, we live on the river. But my question is, can't the raising and lowering of it begin, say, 4 or 5 days earlier, last 4 or 5 days longer, and be done maybe an inch a day as opposed to 8, 10 inches all at once? When it's shut off, the river literally freaking dries up. And I just, I understand why it all has to happen, and I appreciate the 6 inches, I think that's helped. But it just seems like a slower process would make it way healthier for the ecosystem of the river. That's all. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, we do have another series of presentations that may help set the stage for that question.
Maybe that
Is
was
it-
early.
Right, but great question, yeah.
Okay, let's move on. Next item is the Priest Lake Outlet Dam Operations, Lake and River System Management Best Practices Handbook, which is their handbook. And speaking to that, Michelle Richmond, who is the Department of Northern Regional Manager. Good morning, Michelle.
Yeah. Yeah, there we go.
Thank you to the special committee chairman, and appreciate you having this meeting, and I look forward to a dialogue afterwards. The purpose of this talk is to discuss how dam operations are made at the Priest Lake Outlet Dam and how to manage the river and the lake as a system. And I'll identify some data gaps and cover some frequently asked questions along the way. So as Amy mentioned, the Idaho Water Resources Board is the current owner of the dam. And the board is the entity that funded the rehabilitation of the dam that was completed in 2024. And I hope to convey to you today that we're trying to develop a plan that benefits both the lake and the river, and to really strike a balance between the two. And we're also planning for the future in case the next 10 years are as hot and dry in summer as the previous 10 years have been. And I'll also cover some framework for dam operation decisions. And then Bill will be covering 2026 operations in his presentation. He's an engineer out of Northern Region. So there are several inputs to take into account when making dam operation decisions. And as Amy discussed, we have the written guidance, like Idaho statute, and as well as the Priest River Basin Plan. And we have water rights and adjudication claims held by the governor for the lake and by the board for the lake and the river. And we also have input from stakeholders like yourselves, which we do take into account. And then you have natural inputs such as weather. And we also need to consider basin characteristics and hydrology of the basin. We rely heavily on monitoring information such as the lake and river USGS gauges. And then there are the physical capabilities of the dam itself that influence operations. And so Bill and I will go into each of these in further detail. So as for the natural inputs, the water bodies in the Priest River Basin are all snow fed. Snow melt fed, and as you know, there are no upstream dams to release more water to us late in summer. So we really have one shot to use the water and use it wisely. And Josh, who's presenting soon, will also tell you that there's always been enough water, enough runoff to fill the lake more than twice. But once that runoff is gone, and we're in late summer, that's the point at which conditions are often hot and dry. And it can be a struggle to keep up the lake level and to maintain sufficient flow in the Priest River. Another point to make here is that we have very little information about the flow in the tributaries and the thoroughfare. And you might notice some dots, red and purple dots on the map. And that's showing where we're beginning to collaborate with the Department of Environmental Quality to have some shared monitoring. Weather is also a huge input and it informs our daily operations as it relates to precipitation, evaporation, wind on the lake, freezing, and extreme heat. All of those impact the lake. And we also closely watch the NOAA weather forecasts year round, as well as the NRCS snow-tell sites in spring. So NRCS maintains 2 snow-tell sites that we watch closely every year in spring. They're both at about 5,000 feet, and they are the Bunchgrass Meadow and Hidden Lake sites. And as Josh will explain later, we also rely heavily on the NRCS drought monitor, which is released each month in spring. And the water supply forecasts are released each month in spring, and then we look at the drought monitor. So on a year-round, everyday basis, sometimes multiple times in a day, we reference 3 USGS stations, and those are the lake level gauge, which is just off of the Osprey campground on the lake. And then the Priest River gauges, and one gauge is just downstream of the dam. And then one is the Priest River near Priest River gauge, which is 3 miles upstream from the town of Priest River. And those are all real-time gauges. And the photo shows the river gauge that's just below the dam. So every spring, we work with our hydrologists in Boise to make 2 main decisions. And the first decision is to decide if we'll be bringing the lake up or catching it on the way down from peak runoff. And you can see in the chart that those years with the red circle around the peak, they did not have a runoff peak. Instead, we had to close the gates enough to restrict the flow through the dam and bring the lake up. So the other years are the years where we caught the lake as it was coming down from runoff. The second big decision is to determine if the type of year is wet or dry. And the reason that's important is because the way statute is written, we can hold the lake between 3 and 3.5 feet in a dry year. But in a wet year, we would hold it to 3 feet. So this slide shows the river outflow through the dam in 2021 as it dropped from 2,500 CFS in early June to 200 CFS in early July. So the goal each spring is to stabilize the lake at a particular level after peak runoff. And to do that, we need to match the inflow from tributaries while the runoff is naturally declining. So as the inflow drops 2,300 CFS, we decrease the flow in the dam through the dam to match that. Since we don't have real-time flow data on any of the tributaries, we estimate the flow, the inflow that is. And Josh will describe how to do that. We also monitor the stage in Granite Creek for daily fluctuation. And we're working with Department of Environmental Quality to develop a rating curve on Granite Creek so that we can calculate flow in the creek. And that's an important one to monitor because Granite Creek represents about 42% of the total inflow from streams. And then one other note to make is that this slide shows inflow decreasing, but there's a lot of times in spring where it's not just nicely falling, it's increasing and falling rapidly. And in order to reach our goal of stabilizing the lake level, we match that. So we're fluctuating as Mother Nature is fluctuating. So our operations reflect that. Another thing that we do in spring is if we're bringing the lake up, we sometimes have to restrict the flow to get the lake to come up. So you may notice that in the river. So summer operations, we'll switch gears here, and for about 70 years, the lake was held at 3 feet per statute, as Amy explained. There were no decisions that needed to be made. The lake was just held at the 3 feet all throughout the recreation season. And then when the statute changed in 2018 to enable the lake to come up to 3.5 feet in dry years, that's when we started having to think, how do we use this extra 6 inches? How do we make this work for the lake and the river? The dam modification with the 6-inch height increase, you can see with the yellow arrow there, that's the extra 6 inches. That was completed in 2022. And so since 2022, we've held the lake above 3 feet those 4 summers because they were all classified as dry years. So in 2025, we held the lake near 3.5 feet early in the recreation season. And we did this by matching the inflow as it dropped, and we closed the gates to match that declining inflow. So we've got the lake level on the left, and we've got inflow on the right side. And once inflow reached 200 CFS, we set the outflow through the dam at 200 CFS constant for the rest of the recreation season. I don't know if you probably won't be able to use my pointer, but there's a flat low spot on the right hydrograph. And that represents the 200 CFS that we held through the dam all summer. And during that time, we let the lake level drop. You'll see the dashed line on the left graph represents the 3 feet level, so the lake naturally dropped to the 3 feet as inflow declined and through evaporation. Let's see. So while the dam was passing 200 CFS, the Priest River near Priest River gauge was reading 276 CFS, and it didn't drop below that also. So I think that was the first time that had ever happened. Supporting guidance. Let's talk about some written guidance and how we've used it to inform our operations. So we have the Priest River Basin Plan, and Idaho Fish and Game recommended the 200 CFS as a minimum flow from August through October. 400 being ideal. And then the board, as Amy described, has the minimum stream flow water rate for 300 CFS during August, September, and October. Other guidance is to avoid sudden fluctuations in the river. So we'll talk about how we use that guidance. First, let's look at 2017 as an example year. It was a tough year because of sustained low flow below 100 CFS during the months of August and September. And based on the guidance I've explained, we can consider a hypothetical target flow rate that we would have liked to have maintained in these dry years. And that's represented by that black dashed line. And then along with that target flow, we can think about a volume of water shown by the red box that represents a volume deficit when the river fell below our target flow. So carrying that concept forward, this table shows 4 different target flow rates from 150 CFS to 200 CFS. And we calculated the volume deficit for that target flow rate and the corresponding lake level that would be required to store that extra volume of water. So you can see for a target rate of 200 CFS, the a volume of 12,108 acre feet would have been required and a lake level of 3.51 feet. And for 185 CFS, that would have required 10,413 acre feet and then lake level of 3.44. So that's year 2017. Then we can look at a range of years from 2017 to 2021 and average them together to see what those would be. And the worst case was 2017. But when you average them together, it shows that to meet 200 CFS target flow for a recreation season would have required a lake level of 3.38 feet. Some years that target flow wouldn't have been met just because of various conditions, if it's dry, hot. So that's an average. And then going back to the chart, a target of 185 CFS would have required an average of 3.31 feet of lake level. Having that extra storage is just a way to plan for August and September, which have been drier in the recent 10 years than they were in prior 10 years. So you might be wondering, why not the 400 CFS? And when that's the ideal flow that Fish and Game recommended. And the answer is we don't have the legal authority to store enough volume of water in the lake to last through the end of September.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Joan.
Michelle, can I ask a question? How about 300 CFS, the board's minimum stream flow? Is there enough water to store there, or is there not enough water?
Well, let's go back to 2017, even for a target flow rate of 200 CFS, we're already at 3.51 feet. So 300 would be even
Higher.
more in those toughest of tough years. So when we take all of the information into account, the recommended best practices are for dry years to hold the lake between 3 and 3.5 feet and aim for that target flow rate of 200 CFS. And adjust down if necessary. As for limiting the fluctuation in the river, our best practice is to limit our adjustments to no more than 20% of the current flow. Following these best practices, as we did in 2025, we start off by bringing the lake to that target lake level, maintain that lake level until we reach a flow of 200 CFS, then hold that. And so then we'd be switching from lake level maintenance mode to river flow augmentation mode for the rest of summer. And we keep a constant flow rate of 200 CFS through the dam, and we monitor the lake level and decrease that flow if needed, if the lake was dropping too quickly. And Josh will explain a tool that he has developed to help with this decision. In the year designated as a wet year, we will hold the lake at 3 feet, and it will be just as it had been for prior decades. There will be no flow augmentation in Priest River in those wet years. But getting back to your question, the Priest River near Priest River gauge. So when I say flows in these target flows, I'm talking about right from through the dam. But the flows down at Priest River near Priest River are always a little bit higher. So that does help. So some of you may be wondering what date the flow drops below 200 CFS each year. And looking at 2017 to 2021, that tended to happen in early to mid-August. And in 2021, however, the flow dropped in early July to the 200. And so for those years, the average was about 60 days to get through September 30th. This year is different. So right now, as of yesterday, we're at 213 CFS. And if that happened early, and the extra volume of water will need to last 80 days to get us through September 30th. Currently, the lake level is at 3.5 feet, which is right where we want it to be to have that extra water to last hopefully through September 30th. And as for a comparison, while the dam's passing 213 CFS, Priest River near Priest River gauge is at 378 CFS right now. So this slide's trying to show that the type of year, being wet or dry, can flip when looking at April to September on the left side versus August to September on the right side. So for the years 2017 through 2024, wet years are shown in blue, dry are shown in yellow, and very dry are shown in pink. And you can see that of the 4 years that started out as wet, only one, and that was 2020, stayed as a wet year in August and September. And the opposite can happen too in 2023 when the year started dry and ended up wet. But in most of these recent years, the last few months of summer have been really dry, and that's why you're seeing yellow, mostly yellow on the right side in August and September. And the flow, when you'll notice when August and September are wet, shown in blue on the right side, that the flows stayed above the 100 CFS. If August and September are hot, we're dropping below the 100 CFS, and this is using past practices. So now, we'll switch gears and talk about fall release and best practices there. So according to statute, fall release is allowed after the main recreation season. And the minimum winter lake level set by statute is 0.1 feet. Idaho Fish and Game recommends that fall release be completed before November 1st. And that's to avoid dewatering redds in the shorelines of Priest Lake. And you can see the dewatered redds in the photo taken by Hilder in 2019. In the Priest River Basin Plan, Fish and Game guidance also says that flows greater than 600 CFS in fall have negative impacts, and that 1,000 CFS is the maximum recommended flow. So this is how it was done historically. There were historic agreements arranged for the fall release of, and this was for power production. So using past practices, gates would be opened incrementally, as we see on the left side of the hydrograph. And then the gates would be out of the water. And so then we're at the peak of the graph. And the lake would be allowed to drain on its own. And as shown here, the peak flow would often exceed 2,000 CFS using this method. And since those historic agreements are no longer in effect, there's no need to release that water all at once for power production. And we don't need to drop to the 0.1 feet in winter. So the lake has the potential to peak above 5 feet every spring from runoff. So releasing some lake level in winter to make space for spring runoff is recommended. And our recommendation is to begin that fall drawdown on October 1 with a cap on the flow of 1,200 CFS. The lake at this cap of 1,200 CFS would reach about 0.5 feet by November 1st. And the lake would be maintained at or above that 0.5 feet for the rest of winter. And this recommendation tries to address both the protection of habitat through the capped flow, and as well as assistance to dock companies who are working in the lake after November 1, who need a lower lake level for their work. So this chart shows how that capped flow looks, with the red dashed line representing the 1,200 CFS cap. What we're doing is cutting off that 2,000 CFS peak. So as we move forward with some best practices, we've got data and input from stakeholders. And our goal is to make informed decisions that take stakeholder input into account when feasible, given all the inputs that we're managing. And as for communication, many of you know that we post our operations once or twice a month on our Facebook page and on our public website. So feel free to check those out if you haven't already. And then in closing, I just wanted to reiterate that the practices we're recommending create a plan for the future, and we're aiming to strike a balance to manage the lake and the river as a system.
Thank you, Michelle. We've got 2 more presentations. The next one is,
I have a question for Michelle.
okay,
Now, right now you say the river is at 205? To be feet,
213.
oh, 213. What will trigger release from the dam? How old is that river gotta get before you start releasing water from the dam? And we're early, here's the 13th of July.
Yeah, we don't wanna drop below 200 if we can help it, so we'll stay here. As long as we can, but if we hear from hydrology in Boise, hey, the lake, and if we see it too, if the lake is dropping too quickly. And we need to slow things down, we're going to have to reduce that flow below the 200 CFS. By how much, we'd have to figure that out, depending on conditions.
But right now, it's dropping on a daily rate.
Yeah, right now we're steady, we just got to 213 yesterday, and we'll probably get down a little bit to 200, and then we'll just hold it for as long as we can for the rest of summer.
But that's gonna be a big challenge.
Yeah,
We got, hot week
it
coming
will
up.
be hard. We have 80 days to make it to September
Right.
30th.
So you got basically 6 inches or half a foot of water to play with between now and say Labor Day or whatever.
Yeah, so we'll be watching the lake level carefully and evaluating whether we need to drop that target flow below 200 CFS to stretch out that 6 inches of volume in the lake.
But I see on the chart here in 2021, July 8th was the event year, and you started dropping water then.
July 8th of 2021, we didn't have the extra 6 inches.
You didn't have that site. So how,
So that slide probably said, or there's another slide that probably said how low, oh, this one. In 2021, the lowest flow was 63 CFS.
yeah, that was the lowest it got, so it was pretty challenging that year.
Yeah.
And then you got water temperature, plays a role in that too, that's. I know fishing game is concerned about that, so. Yeah, you got some challenges ahead of it, this year it looks like it won't get better, it looks like it'll get worse. A bigger challenge for you as
Yeah, it could be.
the summer goes on. Well, thank you, Michelle, for that.
Thank you.
So the next speaker is Josh Morrell from the Idaho Department of Water Resources hydrologist. He's gonna speak to Priest Lake operations and the water supply forecasting protocol.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Josh Morrell and I'm a hydrologist at the state office. And kind of my role in all this is supplying Bill and Michelle with information on water supply and inflow. So for my role, I kind of think of it as like 3 kind of distinct time periods. So first would be pre-season, so kind of before the snow starts melting, which is typically before Memorial Day. And then second, during the snow melt, so that's while the snow is actively melting out, and that's usually between April 15th and June 1st. And then finally, the during season, so that's kind of that summertime period, and that's after all the snow is melted out, which is typically between June 1st and Labor Day. And so as Michelle alluded to, kind of before the season starts, during the preseason timeframe, we have to designate whether the it's a wet year or a dry year, and that dictates on what the lake level is held to. And so one of the ways we do this is this figure right here, which is showing historical April through September volume of water to move through the Priest Lake system. And so each year is ranked by how much water there was essentially. So on the left is wetter years and on the right is drier years. And so then on top of that, we plot the 2026, like the current year's forecast from the NRCS. And so that's what that green bar is. And so kind of where that range lines up with the historical data is gives us an estimate on what we think the year is going to be. And so for this year, it fell very distinctly in the very dry year. And just in general, things were, I think everybody in Idaho knew that it was a super dry year and the governor declared a drought. So it's fairly easier to determine that. But other years where it's a little more tricky, we'll look at snow sites, the NOAA seasonal outlooks, the US drought monitor, and then soil moisture. And so kind of the next time frame is while the snow is melting out, we keep the NRCS release forecasts every month during the spring, we keep a close eye on. And then we monitor the snow and weather really closely and then inflow calculations. And so kind of diving a little more into the NRCS forecasts, they provide those forecasts once a month essentially for the spring. And so this figure right here is kind of showing an example of one of those forecasts where they give a range of expected values for the amount of water that is expected to move through Priest Lake through the spring and summer months. And so the left side of the red is like the lower end of the forecast and the darker colors are the higher end of the forecast. And so there's almost always enough water to fill the lake more than twice over. And so for this year, the May through September forecast was saying that we should get 265,000 acre feet of water. And it only takes, I think it's 120,000 acre feet to fill the lake from 0 to 3 feet. So there's always almost enough water to fill the lake more than twice over, but the timing is kind of the crux of it. So when that water comes and how it comes down is kind of the tricky part of it. So yeah, additionally, we keep a very close eye on snowfall sites and we calculate melt rates throughout the spring to see how quickly the snow is coming off. And then the percent melt out rate at each of the snowfall sites. And then kind of a new thing we started looking at this year is SWE volume estimates. I don't know if people know what SWE is, but SWE is the snow water equivalent. So it's the amount of water that's held in the snowpack. So if you were to melt it, that's how much water there would be. And so this figure here on the right is a product from the Montana Climate Office. And what it's showing you is SWE volume in acre feet. So it's the amount of water that's in the snowpack. And then on the y-axis on the left is the different elevations. And so what that's showing you for the blue data is that's 2026 data. And that's showing you at each elevation band, that's how much water is being held up in the snowpack in the Priest Lake Basin. And so that's a helpful tool, especially in the later spring when, say a snowfall site, I think the highest one we have is at 5,000 feet. It could say there's 0 snow left, but that could not happen at the higher elevations. So if you're just looking at the snowfall site, you might think there's no more snow, but there could still be a substantial amount of water that's held up in the snowpack at the higher elevations. So we keep a close eye on local weather forecasts in the mountains because especially in the springtime, if it's warm and there's a wet storm and there's still a substantial amount of snow held up high, and it rains up there, it can send a lot of water down really quickly. And additionally, we keep a close eye on the NOAA climate outlooks for the summer. And so like Michelle said, we don't have any monitoring sites for inflow into the lake, so that has to be estimated and calculated. And how we do this is this equation on the slide kind of shows how what goes into it, but it's the change in storage in the lake plus the outflow gives us our estimated inflow. And that equation kind of has its uncertainties and difficulties. So we get the change in lake volume from the staff gauge that's on the lake, and the staff gauge can be quite noisy at some points just because of the wind and there's kind of a sloshing effect on the lake. And so you can get a kind of noisy readings. So generally what we'll do is we'll take the lake level at midnight because that's usually when it's the calmest. But sometimes if during like a storm or whatever, the data will still be super noisy. And so this right here is kind of showing an example of how much of a variety of answers you can get, I guess, to the equation. So during those noisy time periods, so if you picked a lower value on the staff gauge for the calculation, you would get an inflow of minus 3,000 CFS, which clearly doesn't make any sense. And then if you took the higher one, you would get inflow of 4,000 CFS. And so typically what we'll do in these periods where it's super noisy is we'll take we'll do an averaging technique around that time frame midnight to get a kind of more realistic value. And so if we did that, it'd be like 1,700 CFS. And some more challenges for that during snow melt time period is, that's snow melt and stream flow timing. So when all that water is going to come down, we can look at all the forecasts we want, and but Mother Nature could have its own agenda, and so things can come down quick. And additionally, there's a lag effect from lake operations. So when there's a gate adjustment, it takes a little while for that to ripple through the system. And then there are unknowns in the relationship between the upper Priest Lake and Priest Lake itself. And yeah, like I said, there's no gauges, so we have to calculate inflow. And that wind effect can make the data kind of noisy or add some uncertainty to the calculations. And then additionally, there's a 1 day lag in the calculation, so it's not a real-time calculation. We're usually calculating the day before, so we don't have any real-time inflow. It's always a 1 day lag. And then we also don't include evaporation in those calculations because we don't have real-time evaporation data. And then Priest Lake is a managed lake, so that equation isn't gonna work as well as what if it was just a natural system. And so this figure here on the right is kind of highlighting that, so that darker value is that daily inflow calculations that we do, and you can see it's pretty spiky, and that's not how you would expect like a unregulated river to act, and so it's very spiky, and it's not a very natural looking hydrograph, and so we will also provide Michelle and Bill with a 5 day average inflow, and that's that lighter blue line, and that's a little more smooth and kind of follows more what the real inflow is most likely. And so kind of after the snow starts melting, we still keep a close eye on weather, continue to provide them inflow calculations. And then a new thing we started doing this year is lake level and outflow projections. And so the whole goal of this, like Michelle was talking about, is we want to see if we can keep the lake at 3 feet while also maintaining a 200 CFS outflow. And so what this figure is showing right here is lake level, and so the green line is 2026 actual data. That's, I think I updated this on last Thursday. And then the dashed blue line is projected data. And so for that reason, that equation is down below. But basically what it is we're using 2019 inflow data, because that was a very similar snowpack year and it had very similar weather patterns as we've had so far this year. And so we use that 2019 data, and then we hold outflow to 200 CFS, and then we also subtract out the max evaporation that's ever been seen at Priest Lake, just so we get a worst case scenario from the summer, which it's looking like it's gonna be hot and dry, so. And so from last Thursday on, essentially, we're projecting forward at what the lake level could be at, and while also keeping the outflow at 200 CFS, so. Currently, it's looking like we might be okay through early September, but you never know. And so, yeah, this is all the data that I provided to Michelle and Bill and try to help them out with operations. Yeah.
Thank you.
Happy to field any questions. Yeah.
Yes.
So how much do you think evaporation affects your calculation?
Because I don't do that for the inflow for the daily ones, but I think the max ET for the summer that's ever been seen is like 120 acre feet a day during the August period, so it can't be a substantial amount of water.
Is that included in your calculation?
And yeah, that's included in this projection, so I use like the maximum evaporation that's been seen at Priest Lake for the summer months, just kind of give us a worst case scenario.
Josh, about 2 weeks ago, we had a significant amount of rain falling in the basin up there. How that impact flows? Do you tracking that?
Yeah, it went up, it definitely spiked, yeah, it's pretty responsive, yeah.
Do you know how many inches of rain that might have fell in that time frame?
I don't remember specifically, but I wanna say like at least an inch at the high mountains, but.
Yeah, that could help you out quite a bit. We can get a couple of events during the rest of the summer. But along with all the forecasting, it doesn't look too promising.
No, it's not looking good for Idaho.
I think I've lived here all my life and seems like the runoffs are getting earlier.
Yeah.
You used to peak in June.
Yep.
Now it's May or April or maybe sometime even March, I've seen.
Yeah,
Peaks out, so.
yeah, it's definitely, that's like, even I didn't talk to this, but in this figure, I also shifted the 2019 inflow data 2 weeks back, because we're 2 weeks earlier than even 2019.
It seems like 2015 kind of changed everything in the weather throughout the whole west, I think, for the most part.
Yeah, definitely feels that way.
More dry conditions and that's snowpack.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yep, thank you guys.
Is there any Board member questions online? Hearing none. Move on to item number 5. Priest Lake Operations 2026 season update. Bill Price from the engineer with the department. Now you make a presentation.
Chairman. Thank you for having us. My name is Bill Cressy. I'm the Regional Dam Safety Engineer for the Idaho Department of Water Resources. And I'm going to do a relatively short presentation today, just to talk about the numbers and where the river flow and the lake levels were, and are going to be throughout the rest of the year. So, as you know already, Michelle and Josh already talked about that it's going to be a very dry year. It is a very dry year, and there's Deborah's done had a drought declaration. So I'm gonna jump ahead to just simply talk about the year-to-date dam operations. So our overarching guidance has always been Idaho Code 70-507, and that says during the summer recreation season, we keep the lake level of 3 to 3.5 feet. And you'll notice when you look at that slide, so the graph on the left side is the lake level elevation, and then on the right is time, of course, but you'll see that what we did this year that was different than others. I mean, we're operating with 6 inches more storage than we had previously. But what we did different than normal was we tried to bring the lake level up sooner to prepare for a dry summer. The only other interesting thing that you might see is when you see blips like that. This there, that's what Josh was talking about earlier, that our readings can be affected by wind. Sometimes they're affected by outages, and then also that blip was probably damaged. Or there's times when Roy has to do some sort of maintenance at the dam, that'll affect the smooth looking graph to make it less smooth. So I guess I'll dwell there a little bit. You can see that on the left side of the graph, we were dealing with December's heavy rains. You can see we're getting rid of that water, and then on the right side of the graph, you can see we're heading to maintain the lake levels. So other than lake levels, there's the flow. So our goal is we try to keep, we're governed by statute to keep the lake at a certain level, but we try to keep the river flow at 200 CFS or greater all the way through September. Mother Nature permitting, sometimes Mother Nature doesn't permit that. And, just carrying on with one of the themes maybe in these presentations is, so how do we make changes at the dam? It's not just a simple thing. So there's a process where Josh will tell us to give us a forecast, and Michelle and I will talk to Roy, and then we'll have openings or closing. We'll need to open or close the gates. Well, there's 11 gates at the dam, and he takes his picture there. He takes his big quarter wrench out to the gates, and he opens them up, and he eyeballs those red marks on the side of the concrete cured there, and that's how we make the changes. We make gate openings and closings in that manner. We could, depending on the situation, we could open all of the gates a little bit, or we could open just a few of them. And just to kind of give you a status, so yesterday we were at about 3.51 and about 250 CFS in the morning. Then we made a gate change, a gate closure, and we're at what Michelle says, we're at 213 CFS this morning, and about 3.5, 3.4 million right around there. Moving on to the fall. Is just to talk to you about, our plan for the fall drawing. It's, as typical, it'll start October first. As typical, it'll end by November first. What's a little different is, as Michelle described earlier, is we'll cap the flow of 1,200 CFS. And then what that means is that on, November first, instead of being at 0.1, lake level elevation, will be at 0.56. What did we have for in the past? 15 minutes, so a little bit of a change from last year, so we're capping the flow this year at 1,200. Now, you maybe heard a trend in some of the notes, remarks you've heard today is that, one of the things that makes it difficult to do our job is not knowing how much water is gonna be at the dam or when. So, what we have been working on since before I even started at the department is that we take measurements of the flow measurements of all the tributaries that we can put our hands on, and we also try to put staff agents on all those tributaries. Currently, we don't have any real-time data to access as far as the tributary inflows, but this month or this summer, hopefully we'll measure Lamb Creek, Kalispell Creek, Eagle Creek, Granite Creek, Cut Creek, and put it up at the Upper Priest River. And then we'll try to put a staff gauge on all those tributaries. And if you think about operating a dam, imagine if we can finally get to know what the flow is at Upper Priest River, which is clear above Upper Priest Spring. So maybe that wouldn't that be grand to have that much warming and know how much water is coming up again. And perhaps when it will arrive. So let's talk a little bit about stakeholder feedback. I wouldn't say we get a lot of stakeholder feedback, but some of the stakeholder feedback we get, I'll get phone calls and say, I need to. When do you think the lake level is gonna be at 2.85? Because that's what I can put in my dock. Or Elkins Resort, last summer we got some feedback from them, and so the sooner you can bring the lake level along to summer pool, the better. If you could do it by Mother's Day, that would be good. We also get feedback on more accurately as questions. When do you think the lake level in the spring is going to come up to 4 feet? As in 4.3 or 4.4 feet, my basement flow. So I want to be able to plan for that. People have that, and we also get feedback about river fluctuations, and I think we'll have a good discussion after this presentation about fluctuations. But what we try to do, though, we have two targets. Is we try to keep the changes in the flow to 20% of the flow. So if this morning it was running at 100 CFS, we would try to only do 220 CFS change. We also have kind of an upper limit. We will likely not, unless we're in an emergency situation, we'll likely not ever exceed 400 CFS change. The catch is Mother Nature doesn't always let us do that, and if we have water stacked up against the floodgates, we need to make larger changes. That. Did I say this is going to be a short presentation?
Thank you, Bill. Is there any more questions for Bill?
This isn't really a question, but you mentioned Roy, that's me. And going over, open and closing the gates. I brought one of the benches that we use to raise and lower it, so after the install, I'll be available for questions.
You're right. Okay. We've reached the public comment period. You want to keep soldier through, or you want to take a break? So the protocol. Provide opportunity for broad public comments. Agencies and representatives from organized groups will be limited to 5 minutes. Individuals limited to 3. After public comments, the public is welcome to submit written comments of the Water Resource Board through July 24th, 2026. So,
Chairman, yes, sir. Before you begin public comment, my name is Ford Elsesser. I'm chairman of the Lakes Commission. And Molly Khan, our executive assistant is also here today. And first, I want to welcome the whole board to here in a beautiful downtown Priest River, where the library is really the centerpiece of what we've done to rebuild the downtown, and hope that you are enjoying seeing what's happened here since past years, where it wasn't quite that way. Second, I want to really emphasize from the Lakes Commission standpoint, how much we really appreciate Michelle and her team. It's just been and I live on the free flowing stretch of the river as well, so it's just been a night and day situation during these dry years. To have reasonably cool, reasonably decent stream flow in August has been something that we were missing for almost every other year up until we were able to keep the water up the additional 6 inches. But I just think that I know Michelle responds to all stakeholders inquiries, and just does a remarkable job in keeping our stream flow to the best it can be, given the adverse climate situations we're dealing with pretty much every season right now. So I want to mention that, and with that, I really appreciate you all coming up here and having this public meeting. It's just great that you're here, and I want to thank Dale Van Stone and all of you also for helping us get the funding back when from Governor Otter, and getting the thoroughfare, which hasn't been mentioned, but the thoroughfare repair, which I have not heard a single person say anything but kudos for the work that was done on the thoroughfare, but also on the dam itself and the work that we're all talking about today. So thank you all for paying so much attention to the Priest Lake and the Priest River communities.
thank you, sir. Okay, so the first person that signs up to speak is Paul. Jeremy. Yeah. Please.
I got 3 minutes, it's gonna be quick, but, I'm here to present just a practical conceptual, idea for the future of Priest River, Priest Lake, and what I don't want is Lower Priest River to continue to become the thermal sewer for Priest River from Priest Lake. So in the past, there used to be trout that summered in Priest River. Now there are none. That's because of rough climate change, and that is going to continue. Now, some of the ideas I've come up with that are not popular are going to be raising the outlet dam another 6 inches, and taking that water and the cool water from the thermal pipe and siphoning it back in, the partially cool part from the Priest River. The dam, this has already been rejected again. The dam should be converted to hydropower. It is an incredible waste of energy if that dam is going to be there. It's a waste of resources. And nowadays, we can bury the cables, even high voltage cables, even underwater and underground, so there's less of an impact there. A modest increase in lake store, well, I'm going to do that. I'd like to see bull trout restored to Priest Lake, and Idaho Fish and Game has continually resisted do that. And partial funding should come from voters' fee. If you saw all the traffic coming down through Priest River on a Sunday, it's just amazing. It's just this line of cars. The use up there is extensive. And partial funding should come from electricity and a steep new development fee.
because predatory developers are going to harm our lake and our local ecosystems. Furthermore, there are systems that can extract heat from even colder water, and it can be stored for the winter. They're doing this in the Netherlands. It's called aquifer thermal energy storage. And they use heat pumps, and they take the heat out of the water, they put it in an aquifer or some other storage facility, and then they let it go in the winter to heat connected homes and buildings with hot water. So natural cooling is never going to be enough anymore with the climate change. It's only going to provide minimal pockets for the Lower Creek ecosystem. And river heat pumps and your cold water refuges and seasonal heat storage systems can remove excess summer heat from the lake and the river and provide winter heating for homes. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Next on the list is Betty Gardner. Betty?
I'll just pass these across, so we'll have to step a little bit in, okay? Hi, my name's Betty Gardner, and I represent, I'm a citizen scientist for the Idaho H2O program. So I'm asking for 5 minutes. I've lived on the river for 44 years. My family has lived on 5 different places on the river. I conservatively estimate I have been on the river 3,960 times in my 44 years. I have more first-person personal observation on the river than any of the scientists or specialists in this room or listening. So I think you need to listen to me. Under Section 303D of the Clean Water Act, the Priest River was designated impaired 25 years ago. The definition, and I quote, considered too polluted or otherwise degraded to meet the water quality standards set by states, territories, or authorized tribes in the U.S. The sub-basin assessment of the Priest River from 2003 establishes the total daily maximum load for sediment. And then later, an update of that set the total daily maximum load for temperature. These are considered pollutants, and these are exceeded annually and harming the entire 47-mile ecosystem. Sediment and high temperatures are devastating the river, and the trout are gone, just about. Brown crayfish are gone. The small brown native frogs are gone, replaced by bullfrogs. We now have warm water fish. We have smallmouth bass. Recently, someone I know caught a largemouth bass. I was the first person to find black bullnose catfish, a warm water fish, 7.5 miles up the river several years ago. These things eat the small fry. They eat the crayfish. They eat the dragonfly larvae and damselflies and mayflies. And the sediment, when it fills in the holes between the little interstitial spaces between the pebbles and the gravel in the river, they smother the fish eggs and they kill these benthic macroinvertebrates. And then the mammals and the birds that eat these things are also impacted. Why should I bring this up at a Priest Lake Dam operation meeting? Because I tell you, the main source of these pollutants is the dam. It causes monumental damage that goes unchecked year after year. If you got one, I ran short, but there are 2 handouts here. On Memorial Weekend, my brother, who's a neighbor and lives on the river, was at this spot on the river, and it was underwater. If you look at the first photograph, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines, and it goes over 6, 7, 8 lines. He took this picture. That is a 36-hour drop in the water level when the dam was shut to hold the lake up for Memorial Weekend. 3 foot, I'm not talking 3 inches. There were people rafting in where you see these rocks on Friday. But by Sunday, it was this deep. It goes overnight. Why, and so, excuse me, if you look at the QR code at the bottom, you can actually see 2 short videos my brother shot saying, this is where what it looked like on Friday, and this is where it looks, what it looks like on Sunday. The IDWR is mandated to keep the lake at 3 feet and can go to 3.5 feet. But when the water level that week dropped so far, I had 2 very bright, intelligent people who monitor these things contact me and tell me it was recorded at 3.9 feet. In return, the lake got too full, and there were people at Priest Lake complaining their docks were being damaged. So the river is starving and the lake is overflowing in 36 hours. Sudden changes in water level caused large chunks of the riverbank up and down where we live. I'm talking the size of cars to break off and fall in the river. I can prove this because they still have the grass growing out of them. They're underwater, but you can see the grass. That adds to the sediment. You figure 37 miles, 47 miles of that happening. Also, when the water drops that quickly, it warms up. And that's the other pollutant. And yes, there are other things influencing the river, but not as quickly and obviously as the weekends the dam is manipulated. There's a 2-acre pond between my house and the river. It's 3 feet deep one day. And there's frogs and tadpoles and amphibians and bugs in it. Well, that thing dries up overnight because it fluctuates with the river level. And all of a sudden, a 3-foot pond is 3 inches deep. And all those little critters that can't walk to the river because the water alleyway to the river is now gone, die. And our pond stinks like rotten tuna fish in a hot week when that happens. How'd you like that in your front yard? I've kayaked on the river and I've been delighted to see otter, beaver, muskrat, and they're going along and all of a sudden they disappear under the water. And 3 days later, the river has dropped and their den hole, which was underwater 3 days before, is now open and exposed. So now they are susceptible to eagles and any other predator, where in a natural environment, they would have had time to move their kittens or pups out to another place on the river. I'm telling you this. I know that you guys have done your science and I know you've done your predictions, but look at this picture. How can you deny that a river that was here on Friday and is out there across the road on Sunday is healthy? We need to find a way for the Fish and Game who knows the river is being damaged by the dam, because they give me nods and winks, but can't do anything because of the law. I know the IDWR, maybe you do or you don't know what's going on. I know NRCS knows, and I know the Department of Environmental Quality knows what's going on. And their hands they're all telling me, keep your head under the radar, our budgets were cut, we can't do our jobs, we'd like to help you, the law stinks, but we are bound by the law. And until the community gets outraged, I was told 26 years ago by Glenn Rothrock, until the community gets outraged, nothing will happen. And by the time the community gets outraged, it will be too late to save the river. So I just want you to know there has to be a way for these agencies to work together within the law to keep the lake happy and keep the river alive.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Philip Peterson. You have discussion with microphone?
My family has been on the lake since the turn of a couple centuries ago, when my great uncle ran the buckboard and delivered light freight and mail from Priest River up to Northern. And as you come up, that's the roads, the other road coming through is the Peterson Road. I'm one of those folks. And so I'm a later, right? We didn't get to the lake till 53 personally, but anyway, I do appreciate the meeting. A lot of things that worried me are gone by listening and seeing the issues that you're faced with and the multiple users. Now, the one thing that we'll have to deal with, I've had to replace my solid dock substantially. My friend and neighbor, he's gonna have to his be replaced because these solid docks were built when the water was a half foot less. And they're just destroying our docks. But we'll live with it because we need that extra water. Now, my world at the lake has been, as I was told initially, poor Padre Lake gets dumped early. And about the time that it starts to go down to maintain the dam's 25 more power plants, then about October 15th, we would dump Priest Lake. And our life kind of went around that, including the use of the resorts, etc. And that went fine until the year they said, we're gonna drop it early, October 1, because we're gonna work on the thoroughfare. And that year you also added 6 inch dam. Now, since then, when you dump the water, of course, and we don't even have access to some of the resorts. And I'm glad I don't own one because it's gotten really hurt their revenues when we can't get in there anymore. So the one thing I would like to find out is why we held the water up. Why can't we do a little slower to make the drop extend closer to October 15th than October 1? And I'm not sure why that changed. It wasn't explained today either, why we can't kind of extend that, because it changes. It's changed our world because that's when we started pulling our boats out and leaving historically, and we lose now a couple of weeks of that year. We started. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, sir. Everything's being recorded and will be further discussed. Aaron Blue. Hi, Aaron.
Hi, how are you guys?
Good.
Thank you for having this meeting. This has been really informative, and I'm actually like, I rewrote some speaking points and now I'm like considering all these other things, but I'm gonna try to stick to my speaking points. My name's Erin Blue. I'm the state director for Travel Unlimited. And I've been in that position for about 1.5 years. Previous to that, I've worked for about 15 years on water issues in North Idaho. And I'll speak on behalf of Travel Limited, and also, Travel Limited convened the Priest River Watershed Group a few years ago. And these comments are not reflective of that group. They're not comments coming from that group. I don't want that to be confusing, but I can give a little update on the group as well. Okay, so as you're likely familiar with, TU convened the Priest River Watershed Group, also known as PRWG, right at the cusp of 2024, with funding we secured from BOR's Water Smart program to address the mounting stresses on the 45 miles of the lower Priest River that start out at Dam and go down to merge with the Padre River. Extraordinarily high summer water temperatures paired with habitat loss, invasive species, and land use impacts, both historic and current, have created a main stem river that is basically uninhabitable for fish in the summer, especially our cutthroat and native trout. And we've also heard that it's kind of uninhabitable for all fish in the summer at this point in time. So even it's stressful for even other species that aren't native. And I'm just gonna give a little background on fisheries. I pulled together some numbers and just to give a snapshot of how that's changing. And I kind of took note on the comment that things changed in 2015. And that is like reflected in bull trout counts, actually, that we had a high of red counts of just about 80 in 2014. And then it's been, and that was a high that had shown up previously, but it's been declining since then. So bull trout and west slope cutthroat trout on the Lower Priest River follow a truly unique migration pattern. They leave their natal streams in the East River or other tributaries in the Priest, or even potentially above the dam. And they travel downstream, and then they travel upstream of the Pend Oreille River, this to Lake Pend Oreille. This is very rare, pretty much non-existent, and potentially likely a result of being blocked at Outlet Dam from movement into Priest Lake when they want to. There is times where they can pass through there, but it's not necessarily convenient. And also Albany Falls Dam creates another barrier. So potentially these fish just re-navigated their path up to Priest Lake or up to Pend Oreille Lake. And these fish are not just important to the Priest River. Recent studies have shown that currently about 40% of cutthroat trout that are found in Lake Pend Oreille stem from Priest River. Lake Pend Oreille has many other tributaries. It has the Clark Fork, it has the Pack River, and yet the Priest River is supplying a large proportion of our cutthroat trout. So it's critical beyond just the Priest system. Bull trout reds are trending downward with less than 10 reds counted in 4 of the last 10 years. So, and those are just on the East River, and that's the only place we have bull trout spawning at this point in time. And the 10-year average is 35 reds on average, but 4 of those years fed less than 10. Cutthroat trout numbers have historically been pretty high on the lower portion of the Lower Priest River, but now it's recent studies have shown that they are drastically dropping. But that's one of the things we want to understand is what is the truth there. So that's just kind of a look at how poor condition the fishery is on the Priest River and how important that fishery is to the whole region. I'll give a little update on the Priest River Watershed Group. I know you guys have followed this and been interested in it. The Priest River Watershed Group is led by a small steering committee with diverse interests ranging from Priest Lake, Priest River, fishing and boating and recreation. We've met almost monthly for about 2.5 years to build a productive collaborative process, like amongst very contentious issues and a broad spectrum of participants, to learn about the Priest Basin and to work with local and regional experts to build a restoration plan for the lower river that meets both the human needs and our river's needs. This spring, we completed a restoration plan for the East River, which was a really good learning process for us as we move into the Lower Priest River, which is going to be a lot more complicated and contentious potentially. Which we're going to start that planning this fall. We look at about 2 years to get that done. Yeah, and I was thinking, okay, all right, so the last thing I just want to say, other than I'll state a couple of things that we want to consider in management of the dam. As you're aware, the operations out of the dam are pretty critical to the fishery and to this water and habitat value on the lower river. And we fundamentally, Travel Limited is just super grateful for the relationship that has been built with the board and with Michelle, with Bill, with Amy, and with other department members. So it's been wonderful to have, and we've been grateful for the open and forthright communication with the department and the considerations that are being given to needs on the Lower Priest River outside of the law or the mandate. We look forward to continue this relationship and offering our support as Travel Limited, as the PRWG, to the department however we can to inform and refine and adapt operations moving forward. Just a couple things to note that I was thinking about that are important when we think about outflows. One is the temperature of the water. It's just, it can be critical. We get to low flows and you put in a burst of 85-degree water, that can actually be detrimental to fish when it's twice the amount of water that's already in the stream. So that's, I think, something that we need to build understanding in and how to support that effectively. Considering fluctuations and fall outflows, spring may more naturally have high flows, and so we see that as a little bit less critical. And in actuality, have flushing flows. As I think about moving up, if there is a consideration of moving, the release dates earlier, or the management of the dam, the lake levels earlier, if the loss of flushing flows is not good. So you need some high flows in the spring to help fisheries. It's beneficial, at least every couple of years. And yeah, and that's
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you so much.
Jane Hoover.
I'm Jane Hoover and I live on Priest River, but I also love Priest Lake. I mean, we all do. It's just gorgeous. I have some questions, like if the lake level gets below 3, are we just gonna shut off all the water to the river? I mean, what's gonna happen when that happens? What harm is it gonna do to the fish and the wildlife if the lake needs to drop a little bit below 3 feet? And I know it's the law right now. I feel like we're being very selfish as people, worrying about our docks and whether we can get our boats in the water at a certain time, as opposed to everything. When those little critters that Betty was talking about die, the fish die, all the birds are gone. And we are seeing that happen. We have a swimming hole close to our place where we all love to go swim. It's all covered with that algae and you can't even swim there anymore. And that was something that everybody loved. I also wonder about the fluctuation going up and down so quickly, both up and down. You know, sometimes I feel like all of the ducks have laid their eggs and suddenly the river goes up and you watch all those nests just float away. And so that's other reason that we don't have the wildlife anymore. The heat of the river is because of multiple different things, but you know, we need to look at things like logging on the lake, close to the river, close to the lake. There is so many more people that live on the river now than used to, and everybody sucks water out of the river. I don't know how much that contributes, but you know, they're watering their fields, they're watering their grass. I just wonder how much that contributes also. So that's all.
Thank you. Rick? Not sure, huh?
Rolling?
Okay.
My family's been on the lake for 50 years. We're up on the west side, north. We have a problem every year with high water. I'm wondering if the goal is 3 to 3.5 feet, how much higher than 3.5 feet do we have to get, or can we expect in future? Any answers to that?
Depends on Mother Nature
Right?
and how fast runoff comes down from the hills and.
Is there no calculation that can, because we get close to 5 feet, I mean, that's, 4 years ago, we were over 5. That's 2 feet over what you want to be in the summer. Is the improvements to the dam or calculations anything that my family can count on that might make this better for us in the future? That's one question.
I don't think there's a way to calculate that.
Snowpack, I mean,
Yeah, we can look at.
we knew this year that the snowpack was way down and was gonna certainly affect the lake level, and you brought it up faster, if I'm not mistaken. So it seems to me there's some calculation there for what's at bunch grass and the other place. But I guess my other question, I understand that's a more difficult one. Is the improvements that have been made to the dam in the last couple of years help this situation at all? No?
No.
Okay.
Didn't you turn the stove on?
Oh. I think you're right. I'm sorry, I have neuropathy and balance isn't my forte anymore, so. Thank you for pointing that out. I can feel that back. So that's my nickel's worth is high water's problem as well as all this other stuff. And we're not looking for anything more than just letting you know that that's an issue for us.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Board?
For our vote.
Okay. Mike Savosky? Spinsky. Right. Buddy Brown.
Hi, Mike Spinsky, I represent Elkins Resort, and 3 generations of family on Priest Lake. We have been on Priest Lake operating Elkins Resort since 1983. Water has been critical to our family's success. I've been able to meet with you last year and get my input on raising the lake level a little bit sooner. Back in the day before you guys took over, there was another individual doing this and you did it for a great deal of time. The lake level was always up about April 15th, April 20th at summer level. And then a lot of times it would really go up to incredibly high levels, as you mentioned, I believe 4 years ago.
5.06 4 years ago, about 8 years ago, it was 5.65.
Right. I think since you guys have taken over, we haven't seen as many huge surges as we did in the past. You're doing a pretty good job of managing the water level. I would like to bring up the point that you did. We used to go through the first full week of October, then begin drawdown. So that was the schedule with, I believe, Carl Duncan, correct? So the first full week of October, not first weekend, but the first full week. So that number would always fluctuate, 12th, 13th, 10th, 8th, 14th, could be the 15th, as you mentioned. For our business, having the lake level be higher earlier and stay higher longer is good for us. We can get more people on the water, we can get more people to Hills Resort, we can get more people to Elkins Resort. And people can keep their boats in all around the lake and they get to recreate. The mandate is to maintain the level of the lake for recreation period. I heard somebody mention Memorial Weekend. We've never been under this impression of Memorial Weekend being the recreation start. We've always been at least the 1st of May through the first full week of October. So we'd like you to take that into consideration. We do know that the early water going up, I know it helped the dock builders be able to get docks out. They have about 280 docks they put out every year. It helped us. We had more people boating in, coming in and spending money. That was great. And we'd just like to see you keep maintaining the lake level. The 3.6 has been positive. We're all losing a little bit of beach, but overall it's helping the lake and deal with the hotter periods. We have not seen much of an adverse effect there. If it can help the flows through the river, I think that's a good thing. So, and just barely going above, this year, good job. Hopefully we can, not have that happen on Memorial Weekend, so we can avoid all the wave damage in the boat. But thank you very much.
Okay, that is the end of my list. And I'll be willing to take additional public comment limited to 3 minutes.
I just have another point I want to tell you. October, when you guys.
You please, excuse me, ma'am.
I'm sorry.
It's so that the people online can see you.
Thank you, sorry. So last October, when you guys opened the gates, the river jumped up 3 feet in 36 hours. So not only in the spring or around Memorial Weekend, do we see it suddenly drop. That time in October, it jumps overnight. That's when certain species of salmonids are spawning and their eggs get washed out. Can that not also be done more gradually to make Elkins happy? Start the second week in October, you have till November 1st and take 3 weeks to release the water slowly, because it does the same thing. When it goes up overnight, the banks also collapse. And they're also washing out a whole lot of the very few trout we have left. So, is it possible?
So if we go with shorter time, then we have to increase the flow. So that's a trade-off.
Well, I'm talking about longer time, not 36
If we're
hours.
going from 4 weeks down to 3 weeks, then we just have to bump the flow up more to get the lake down enough for the dock workers and other purposes.
It's totally spawning.
It's
You can't-
That's it.
trade-offs, so we just need to understand all the trade-offs and make decisions.
I just wonder what legacy we're leaving for our grandchildren. Will they be in a world that when they come to the river, there are no dragonflies or damselflies or trout or so many other things are disappearing because of this stuff mankind is doing to Mother Nature? Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Thanks for having me. My name's Jeff Johnson. I've been up there at the lake on the east side for 58 years. My dad started going up there in 1928. Does any of you own property on the river or the lake? No. Okay. I think 3.5 feet's too much, too high. I've talked to all my neighbors. They agree. We're losing our beaches, our retaining walls, our steps and stuff that have been there for 50 years due to the higher water. And the other comment I had was, it seems to me in the last 3 or 4 years that the dam has not been left wide open during the winter. Cause January, February of 24, the lake level got up to almost 3 feet. And then this year, January, it got up to 2 feet. And I know in the past, the dam was left wide open. Carl Duncan left it wide open, I think, from November to probably March or something. So anyway, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
One suggestion I'd have maybe is having one of these meetings up at the lake, like at the end of Priest Lake or something in Cooling. Thank you.
Thank you. What time of year?
This time of year would be good, probably, when everybody's up there.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not opposed to that.
I comment, we have a guy from Fishing Game, John here. Did you want to address anything that was said about the lake level and the fishery aspect?
You indicated myself.
Yes.
I'm with the Army Corps of Engineers.
Oh, you're with the Army.
Yeah, I'm just a park ranger. I just sit in the history.
Okay.
Nothing to say.
Helps.
I wasn't planning on commenting, but
Got lucky.
I'll make it really quick. My name is Amy Anderson. I'm with the Selkirk Conservation Alliance and I also work for Trout Unlimited. I just would like to remind the board that Priest River is also a protected river. Idaho Code 42-1734A authorizes the Idaho Resources Board to protect highly valued waterways, and Priest River has been recognized as a highly valued waterway, and it is protected for both recreation and wildlife, and those also carry certain stream flow recommendations with them as well. And we would just like to, and I would like to applaud that the work that you're doing to actually finally incorporate the ecological health of Priest River into the management of Outlet Dam. In addition to the work that you're doing to plan
we would like to recommend that, you work with Idaho Fish and Game, US Fish and Wildlife, and the Kalispell Tribe, and other applicable agencies and groups, and develop a stream flow management plan and program for the Lower Priest River, whose primary goal is to comply with the protected status of Priest River under the Idaho State Comprehensive Water Plan. What we need is a long-term plan, that helps to avoid further damage to the river. We've been really ignoring the ecological health of Priest River for the last 50 years. And because of that, people on the river have just seen their properties and systems just decline severely, both fisheries and habitat, you name it. And we just would like to applaud Idaho Department of Water Resources for really considering the health of Priest River and your management of Outlet Dam. It's critical for the future health of the river if we want to save what's left of it. So thank you again for your time and for being here today.
Hey, Mr. Chair,
Right.
I would make a motion to direct staff to review the comments provided today and any that are submitted after this meeting. Consider potential changes or develop staff recommendations and bring the updated version of the best practices manual to this committee for review at a later date.
Second,
I'll second.
been moved and seconded. All in favor, online and present, signify by aye.
Aye.
Is there anybody online? Board member online who would like to vote? Or
It
not?
would be just the committee voting.
Okay. Is there any committee members?
That's us.
All right, it's moved, seconded, and 3 in favor, so it passes. So in closing remarks, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to attend today's meeting and for sharing your questions and comments. The board will carefully consider the comments received today, along with any additional written comments, as it continues to refine operating protocols and best practice. The committee intends to review changes and recommendations from staff at a follow-up committee meeting. These operation protocols are intended to be adaptive as new information, monitoring data, forecasting tools, and operational experience become available. Board will continue to consider opportunities to improve operations and provide dam operators with the tools and guidance needed to make informed real-time decisions. We hope today's discussion has provided a better understanding of the Water Resource Board's statutory and regulatory responsibilities in operating the Priest Lake Dam, including protecting public safety, complying with legal requirements while managing the river system. Although no operating plan can eliminate the uncertainty associated with weather, snow melt, and changing hydrological conditions, the recent dam modifications, improved forecasting method, enhanced monitoring, and continued stakeholder engagement provide better tools to responsibly manage Priest Lake and Priest River while balancing the many interests that depend on these resources. Thank you. Thanks for everyone.
Mr. Chair, I move that we adjourn.
You second.
Moving second, all in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.